This is the Dollemore Daily, and I'm Jesse Dollemore. I've talked about it a few times that I served on a federal grand jury, the same grand jury that indicted Michael Avenatti and a few other high-profile cases. And I spent a year, and then they extended it for 6 months. But so I spent a long time, every week after week after week, on this grand jury. And I understand the process pretty intimately. And yesterday, when the one of the forepersons for the grand jury, the special grand jury in Fulton County, impaneled by Fani Willis, the Fulton County DA, I was concerned. One, for Emily Kohrs is her name. I was concerned for her that maybe this is kind of a misstep on her part. I'm glad we have the information. It's just a little premature. We're going to know in just a few weeks. But I'm concerned for her. I hope that she does not find herself in trouble for doing a spate of interviews talking about the goings-on of the grand jury. I don't know about state or local procedures or rules and regulations surrounding grand juries, but I know federal, and it doesn't seem good. So I hope she's okay. She did a CNN interview, and I want to talk about three particular portions of the interview. She was in the room when Mark Meadows testified. She was privy to all of the evidence that is secret grand jury proceedings and not public yet. She's privy to the exact number and names of people who are being recommended for indictment related to the 2020 election interference and the attempt to overthrow the United States government by way of nullifying and overturning that free and fair election. I'm going to start with this, where she's talking about that very thing, the indictments. Watch this.
Would you say, when it comes to, there are indictments recommended, of course. Is it more than 12 people? Is it more than 20 people?
I think if you look at the page numbers of the report, there's about 6 pages in the middle that got cut out. Allow for spacing. It's not a short list.
Not a short list. More, I mean, when it comes to 75 witnesses, like, it's not, I assume, of course, it's not 75 people. Would you characterize it as 20-ish people? I
can't say I counted.
Okay. More than a dozen, though, I think I'd heard you say in another interview?
I believe so. That's probably a good assumption.
The name that everyone wants to know about is former President Trump.
Of course.
Did you recommend charges against Donald Trump?
I really don't want to share something that the judge made a conscious decision not to share. I will tell you that it was a process where we heard his name a lot. We definitely heard a lot about former President Trump, and we definitely discussed him a lot in the room. And I will say that when this list comes out, there are no major plot twists waiting for you.
You know, it's interesting. That just raises more questions of
I know, I'm sorry.
No, please do not apologize. I'm very appreciative of your time. When you say there's no plot twists and, people won't be shocked, people are gonna hear that, and they're gonna think that means that Donald Trump is definitely on that list. I know it's delicate, but can you speak to that?
I can't. Well,
I understand.
I might be able to, according to instructions, but I don't want to. I don't want to speak out on something that the judge, like I said, consciously chose not to release at this point. I don't know if I would interfere with the DA's investigations. I don't know if I would interfere with procedures in some way. I very much do not want to cross that line.
But in your view, people will not be surprised when they see the list of names to come out who you recommended to face indictment.
Especially if they've been following the investigation, I can't see it being a shocker.
So listen, you can interpret her facial reactions and her smiling and her silence and her serious faces on your own. Again, I'm shocked that she made this appearance. Or the multiple appearances. It seems, I don't know what's in it for her other than 15 minutes of fame. Again, I don't think she's a bad actor. I don't think that she's attempting to do this for any malicious intent. Concerned for her, though. But all that talk about Donald Trump is important. Because she's going to go, you'll hear in the not this next, but the next clip, how many phone calls and conversations they heard with Donald Trump's voice. Not just the call with Brad Raffensperger, the Georgia Secretary of State, others. And you also need to keep in mind that although they're referring for indictment, recommending indictment for charges including perjury, but not just perjury. Crimes that happen not just inside the jury room, I think is how she referred to it. You should know that just because Donald Trump didn't testify himself doesn't mean that he's not going to be indicted. On my grand jury, Michael Avenatti never testified to the grand jury. People who had evidence of his crimes did. And he still was indicted. So just because Donald Trump did not testify does not mean he's not a subject or a target of this particular investigation and won't end up being indicted. It won't be for perjury because he didn't testify, didn't perjure himself in this particular proceeding, but he absolutely can be the subject of this investigation and the recipient of a criminal indictment. We also know that Mark Meadows testified. We also know that Lindsey Graham was subpoenaed and testified, John Eastman, others. So we'll see. 20 plus people, more than a dozen people being recommended for indictment. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. Speaking of perjury, here's this little segment, about a minute, regarding those particular charges. Watch this.
The other portion that obviously demands a lot of attention is also the portion, and I'll read this for everyone, where you all wrote, a majority of the grand jury believes that perjury may have been committed by one or more witnesses testifying before it. Is perjury the crime that you all believed was the main crime you all believe was committed?
I wouldn't say that. I would say that it ended up included there because it was less pointed of a suggestion than some of the other things we may have written in the parts of the report the judge chose to keep confidential.
Like less specific to a person?
Right, right. I would say that we thought it was important to keep it separate as well. Okay, I will say that I thought it was important to keep it separate as well, at least in my opinion, not anybody else's but mine, that there's a difference between the crimes we were called to investigate and crimes that were committed in the room.
There's a difference between the crimes we were called to investigate and the crimes we witnessed in the room. Remarkable. Remarkable. And again, I'm going to keep repeating, Emily, I hope you are okay and you consulted someone before you made these interviews. Finally is that section I just talked about. Promised you that the part about Donald Trump, and there were multiple phone calls. And this goes back to something I've talked about earlier today and in previous videos about my experience on a grand jury, is that what you see, the evidence, the things I know about Michael Avenatti go far above and beyond what the public knows because you see all of the evidence. She's admitting here, getting ready to, you're going to hear it, talking about calls that aren't public, that we don't know about, not just the Brad Raffensperger call, others. There's a trove of evidence. Big things are going to come from this, in my opinion. I think, and I'm not privy to the details, I think that we're going to see a number of high-profile indictments from this, possibly up to and including Donald Trump himself. Watch this.
We know that you all heard at least one call that Donald Trump was on during this period. This is the infamous call that the whole world has heard as it was released when he was speaking to Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. But in terms of just calls and recordings of calls. Are there others of those?
I can tell you I heard other phone calls. I don't think I could name all of them right now if I wanted to. After 75 witnesses in 8 months, it gets hard to keep all your bits straight.
Other calls that Donald Trump was on?
Yes. I'm positive I have heard the president on the phone more than once.
That's big. One, just the copious panoply of evidence that was gathered and sifted through and considered by this grand jury. 16 people. A random assortment of Fulton County voters. Big things. I'd love to mix this up with you in the comments. We can talk about it. One, as I stated in an earlier video, it helps with the algorithm to leave a comment, to click like, to share this video, to help my channel get recommended to others, to spread the word, to further the mission of this show, which is spreading the word, changing hearts and minds. Do that. We can also call, leave me a voicemail, 714-576-4054. Of course, you can email me daily@dollemore.com. I'd love to hear from you there. You can follow me on social media. I am at Dollemore, just about everywhere. Good times had by all. And if you appreciate what I do, if I am your flavor of political commentator and give you valuable analysis, breaking down the news in a synthesis that you appreciate, please consider supporting my work. Click the join button below, become a channel member for $2 a month, or head on over to patreon.com/IDoubtIt podcast. And while you're at it, you can subscribe to my twice weekly show on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast. It's called I Doubt It Podcast, hosted by myself and Brittany Page. It is a lot different than this. It is audio. It is not this program. This is not a podcast. This is a YouTube video. And I'd love to see you there. We'd love to have you in the audience. The listenership is growing, and we think we're doing important stuff over there. We'd love to see you there. I'll see you next time as I continue to lose my train of thought in mid-thought. I'll see you next time. Until I do, be genuine. Take care of one another.